What's up, Dice Rollers? Paul here. I'll be your DM for a little while, and today I want to share with you 7 tips for the veteran DM. And I'm going to be getting these tips from my new purchase, Sly Flourishes, The Lazy Dungeon Master by Michael E. Shea. I thought this was a good time as a Dungeon Master myself, who's been DMing kind of on and off for about 30 years, but lately, in the past 5 years, I've been having much more DMing to do. I'm in 3 different groups, and so I thought, what a perfect time for me, and maybe for some of you, to go ahead and say, look, I need to sharpen my skills a little bit. And this is just 7 tips from this book. First of all, I think it's a well put together book. There are 23 articles in there. There are 10 articles by, as of 2012, when this was written, people in the field who were just crushing it as DMs, and they offer some great advice. And then there are some tables in there. So I want to be able to show you a little bit of the book before I start getting into the tips, hopefully to refresh some of you who are maybe taking a break from gaming due to the fact that you can't gather anywhere. But let me just scroll through here and show you a little bit about this. You can see the table of contents there. And all the authors you can see there. I mentioned earlier, there's Jeff Greiner, these articles, Teos Abadia, Dave the Game Chalker, lots of others in there who are offering great articles in there. You can see about this book. Now, see, who is this book for? And that's why I titled this for veterans, because this book is dealing with those who are dealing with or running homebrew games for the most part. I tend to run modules and adventure paths for Pathfinder and other things, just for the sake of time. But I am getting more and more inclined to adventure, so to speak, into homebrew things. Just because it's just an adventure path or a written adventure does a lot of the heavy lifting for me. But I think I am willing to maybe jump in there. So a lot of these things tips that are in here that I'm sharing with you guys, I'm taking for myself. But yeah, here's a lot of the articles that you can see there. I want to get to the tables, and the tables are really good tables. I mean, these are ones you can just print off, keep at your table. Here we go. The Lazy Dungeon Master Toolkit, Appendix A. There's things like 20 adventure Cs, 20 movie-inspired quotes, which I really, really liked. 20 adventure locations, 20 encounter terrain effects, which I am always into because I try to make it a little bit more difficult for my players because, sometimes they're smart players and they know how to play and they know how to team up and they're experienced players. And so I try to make it a little bit harder for them. So 20 PC relationships, how do the characters relate to one another. They could be all former slaves or former privateers. What is their connection to one another? And I always think it's always good to look at these things and you say, well, okay, what can I do to my game to make it a little bit more interesting? And these tables give you the opportunity to do that. But here's the articles from all the different folks here that you see. And it's, like I said, it's a very well put together PDF. I'm going to be also reviewing the Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master and also his Dungeon Master workbook. So those will be coming up in the next couple of weeks. So be looking for that. Let's go ahead and jump into the tips, though. So let's go ahead and jump into the tips. And the first tip I'd like to talk about is, therefore, the more stuff you make, the less likely you are to let your players deviate from that course. Now, this particular quote is concerning world building. And so in world building, the more you create, the more you feel like you have to stick to that which you created. You almost become a slave to your creation because now you want players to follow that path that you've created for them. And there's not a lot of room necessarily for them to deviate from that because all that creating time that you've put into it. So I think that's just a great point to be made, is to, when you're world building, simply keep it simple, right? You don't have to plan out everything, from the time the sun comes up or how many suns there are or any of those things. You simply have to say, look, here's the basics, and then build out from there. Second tip I'd like to bring to you is, you don't, however, want to fill in the rest of the story. The minute you're typing out a seed and you have the urge to start writing more, stop. That's the moment when the story can run free. The storyteller and you may want to grab your net and catch that fleeting winged idea, but don't. Let it go and land raw and untamed in the middle of the table. Let the rest of the group start to draw from the details, unleash their imaginations into the mix, and building it out in ways that you may never have dreamed of. That's the sort of adventure everyone will remember in 10 years. And I think that's such great advice. Sometimes, even myself, I mean, I play these modules and adventure paths and so forth. And I try to, there's a little thing that happens. Maybe I don't, read all the thing. Maybe I just stop just to see how my players are going to react. And it's hard for me. I don't know if it's hard for you. If it is, please leave me, a little comment down below if this is hard for you, because it's hard for me to not say everything or not share everything, because I want to give the players the full context, or I'm just wanting to have my part in the story here, or whatever it is. But taking that little piece and just kind of let it trail off and just throw it in the middle of the table and see what the players do with it. I just need to do more of that. Tip number 3 from the Lazy Dungeon Master is great stories come from great characters. Keeping in mind that creativity comes from limitation, try to keep the number of these characters low. And that is in reference to NPCs. Trying to keep the number of encounters that people need to have with NPCs will obviously limit the amount of names that you have to come up with, which is always a trial for me. But if you keep it to 3 to 4, maybe 2 characters that are there to that you can go deeper into their character, or flesh them out a little bit more as far as giving characters leads, or maybe there are 2 underlings or sub-bosses of the big boss, which you can give a little bit more backstory and flavor to. So if you keep it to 3 to 4 NPCs that the characters have to really deal with, then you can actually do more storytelling than spreading it out over a bunch of NPCs that they have to encounter. Tip number 4 from the Lazy Dungeon Master is building the story from the backgrounds and motivations of your PCs will greatly enhance your players' enjoyment of the game. And this is probably one of my favorite parts of doing this. I've tried to do this often, is to just pick up on little things they say, whether that's maybe about a relative or something they really like or something they enjoy. Some of that information maybe is from a session 0 that you may have, where they're starting to share their ideas and those things. But building the story from the backgrounds, maybe it's about their deities. Maybe they really want to play that aspect up, or maybe it's their weaponry or whatever it may be. I just think it's a great way to add so much more value to the game. Tip number 5 from the Lazy Dungeon Master is sometimes, however, you can use these delegated jobs to keep your players' attention on the game. If you find you have players easily distracted by cell phones, iPads, or personal computers, call upon him or her to manage the table's initiative or track monster damage. If you find, however, that he or she still fails in this job, and it ends up hurting the overall enjoyment of the table, maybe it's best to simply let him or her be distracted, which I totally agree with. Delegation is, I think, so critical, because you have people. There are times in the game where maybe some characters don't have a lot to do, but they do have a job to do. They can keep track of these things. I find this works really well in the cases with teenagers. Teenagers can be a little distracted if they're on their phones, and giving them a role and a responsibility at the table definitely helps them to engage and to keep track of things, and because they have to know what's going on. Tip number 6 for veteran DMs. Wizards of the Coast freelance author and dungeon master Matt James recommends using colored 3x5 cards to help stay organized. For example, he uses red for combat encounters, yellow for notes for political intrigue, and blue for long-term or campaign-wide plots, and green for side treks. I have never used this idea. I have heard of it before, but I've never used it, and so I'm intrigued by it to see if it'll keep me on track or not. And I know that once your players do things go out the window, but at least I would have, at least the things that I need to come back to, or the core pieces, whether that's the political part or the combat or whatever it is, to be able to try and steer them towards whatever is next on the list. And it doesn't matter really what order they go in. It's just that I have those there and I know where I need to take them, versus my head spinning that they've turned left when I needed them to turn right, and now they're off to the races. So I may try and give these cards a whirl. The 7th and final tip from the Lazy Dungeon Master, collide worlds together and come up with something completely new. Run Dark Sun as the background setting for a Gamma World campaign mixed with Stephen King's Dark Tower books. Stick Waterdeep in the middle of the Nentir Vale or Undermountain under the city of Greyhawk. Build a campaign where the Knights of the Round Table must hunt down divine artifacts scattered among derelict spaceships wrecked on the surface of Mars. Okay, my mind is blown by that. I have no idea how that would even work out, but I am excited by all those possibilities. And I think for me, that may be my favorite tip because, once again, for me, my mind is saying, okay, this is a singular thing. We're trying to keep everything in order here. And, you know, like in Ghostbusters, you're not supposed to cross the streams. But in D&D or any RPG, crossing the streams can be a good thing. It can add a little excitement, a little adventure. And so once again, that's why I'm excited about these tips, because it's really giving me some, it's really, driving the juices here to do more homebrew stuff rather than be, boxed in by an adventure path or in an adventure book. And that's it, guys. Those are the 7 tips that I've drawn for me, at least, that I really valued from reading The Lazy Dungeon Master. Tell me, though, what were your favorite tips, or leave your own tip that I didn't share. What is a great tip for other veteran Dungeon Masters? Go ahead and leave me a comment down below. If you're new here, thanks for being a part. Appreciate you being here. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you want to get videos like this in your inbox on a regular basis. And until next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.